everyone, today we'll be learning about quadratic equations and complex numbers. From the first half of the video, we'll be learning about complex numbers, and then the second half of the video, we'll be learning about quadratic equations. So, what are complex numbers? So basically, to express numbers that give negative answers when squared, we define the non-real number, I, which is also called an imaginary number. I'll give you an example. Okay. So, I squared equals -1. Okay. Also, square root -1 gives us I. So basically, a formula was made, which is A is greater than or equal to 0, and square root -a is equal to square root ai. So basically, I was made because when you square a positive and negative number, you get positive answers when squared. So they decided, why can't we just square negative numbers? And instead, they made up I, which is also known as an imaginary number, to represent a negative number when it's square rooted. Okay. So, this only works if a is greater than or equal to 0. It's only true. Yep. Okay. So now I'll give you my first example. It's going to be square root -6. You can pause the video if you'd like to try it yourself. Okay. So by solving this, we need to put it as square root 6i. I'll show you how I got this. So basically, we put square root 6 first of all, and then as I represents square root -1, we put square root -1, and then we get square root -6. See, we got what we got from our question. So our answer is square root 6i. Okay. So now let's move on to square root -8. Same thing. With this time, it's going to be square root 8i. Because square root 8 times square root -1, which is represented by I, will give us square root -8. Or you can also expand this to 2 square root 2i. We learned this in our video on square roots. Please look at this video for help. Okay, so now let's do square root -18. Okay, so applying the formula, square root 18i is our answer. Because, so basically, you do square root 18 times square root -1, which gives us square root -18. Or you can write it as 3 square root 2i. Okay. So now let's move on to a fraction. Okay, square root -3/16. Okay, so we're going to write it as 3/16i. Okay, but I got this because I did square root 3/16 times square root -1, which gives us square root -3/16. Okay, so now let's move on to quadratic equations. Quadratic equations. So what is a quadratic equation? And what is the formula for this? Okay, so we apply the formula ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, and the formula is represented as x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So that is our formula. Okay. So by doing this, so if we have an equation, let's say 3x squared plus 5x minus 7, for example. So this represents A, 3 represents A, 5 represents B, and 7 represents C. So basically, we put, by using the formula, so we take negative B. So in this case, it will be -5. And then we go plus or minus square root B squared. In this case, 5 is represented for B. So it will be 5 squared minus 4 times A, which is 3. So times 3. And then times C. And C is represented as -7. So it's times by -7. Okay. And now 2 times 3, because A is represented by 3. Okay, so what's the next step? So basically, so -5 plus or minus. So now we have to simplify it. So 5 squared equals 25 minus 4 times 3, 12, and then times -7 over 6. Okay, -5 plus or minus square root 25, and then we can do on the side 12 times 7. So we go 2 times 7, which is 14, so 1 at the top, 84. Okay, so we get plus 84 over 6. And then -5 plus or minus 25 plus 84, and then we get 109 over 6. So you can write it in this. So this is our final answer. Okay, so now let's move on to one more question. Okay, so now let's do one more question. Okay, so our last question is going to be 2x squared equals 5x. 2x squared minus 5x equals 0. And then our next step is x equals 5 plus or minus 25 minus 4.2.0 over 4. And then 5 plus or minus 25 minus 0 over 4. Okay, so our last step is to simplify. So 5 plus or minus square root 25 goes to 5, and then over 4. Okay, so we make it to this step. So now we have to we try for both plus and minus. So 5 plus 5 over 4. 5 plus 5 over 4, and we go 5 minus 5 over 4. So in this case, 5 plus 5 is 10 over 4. And 5 minus 5 over 4 equals 0. So our answer is 10 over 4 and 0. So we've found the two roots. Okay, thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video on quadratic equations and complex numbers. Bye.